Hi everyone, my name is Carly Bell and I love to do machine embroidery tutorials. And today we are going to be continuing on our sew along journey for Kimberbell's Main Street Celebration bench pillow. So today we will be working on block number 2, which is the fire station. And if you haven't seen the previous videos, I have a playlist now. The first video is the introduction and how to prep for everything for this project. The second video was the first block, the welcome block, and now we're on our third in this video series to go over how to do the fire station. And as I explained in the first block video, the welcome one, there are 3 different ways that you can make the blocks for this bench pillow. In the first video, we went over how to make them if you have a big enough hoop size, whereas the hoop is bigger than the background quilting and the design itself. In today's video, I'm going to be going over how to make this block, which the finished block size is 6 by 8 inches. And we will be making it in a 6 by 10 hoop. But as you're going to see when I pull up everything in Brilliance, the background quilting design doesn't exactly fit in a 6 by 10 hoop. So if you are limited in hoop size and that your largest hoop is 6 by 10, you're going to want to pay attention in today's video because I'm going to show you how we can tweak it a little bit to make it fit the 6 by 10. Now, if you have a machine that has a hoop as big as 8 by 12 or 9.5 by 14, you can disregard the little changes that I am making to today's design to make it fit my hoop and just drag in both the background quilting and the applique design just like we did in the previous video. If this is the first time you're seeing this video series and are interested in participating in this sew along, I have a whole section on my website dedicated to the sew along that gives you all of the information that you need to participate, where I got all my supplies from, what designs I'm using, the little things that are helping me with organizing. And also I have a free download for you, a kind of cheat sheet organizational chart to help guide you as we're making each block, telling you the name of the block, the background quilting design and size, what page number in the instruction booklet we're going to be referring to, and a bunch of other great information just to have like all at your fingertips and be able to see all at one time. So this is a free download for you on my website. And so the link to this info page should be the first link you see down in the description box under this video. It's my website, carlybell.com. And under sew alongs, it's Main Street Celebration. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I have grabbed my envelope with all of my pieces for the fire station block. I have my background fabric, my batting already pre-cut to size, and all the pre-cuts of the pieces that we're going to be using for applique. I have my cheat sheet and my instruction book. I have a 6 by 10 hoop. Already hooped with the stabilizer I'm using for this project, which is a lightweight muslin cotton fabric. I'm using this instead of poly mesh no-show cutaway. It's a little less expensive, and I think it works great for all of these Kimberbell quilting projects. So I have that hooped already. So have your 6 by 10 hoop if you're following along with me today with this method. If you have a larger hoop, then you're going to want to use either an 8 by 12 or even I think your 9.5 by 9.5 hoop if you have a Stellaire. Those are going to be the hoops that will fit all the background quilting and applique design in one. And then if you are a person that has an embroidery machine where your largest hoop is 5 by 7, stay tuned. The next video in this series will be going over how to make these blocks if you have a 5 by 7 hoop and have to do a double hooping. So you'll get to see all these different methods and then apply whichever one works for you. And then you can do all your blocks in that way. All right, the other thing I have is my little basket of all the thread colors that I'm using for this project. I kind of went off of the thread kit that Kimberbell made available for this project. I just went by the colors, just looking at them and was like, oh, this looks good. I also used all my own fabrics for this project. So you kind of want to coordinate your thread colors with your fabrics if you're going kind of off color scheme from their example. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, I got everything I need, but let's go into Embrilliance and let me show you how I'm tweaking this design to fit in my 6x10 hoop. I always use Embrilliance Essentials, highly recommend. It's my software I've been using for years and years. I use it for nearly every project. Now, with these Kimberbell designs, it's not necessary that you have software to do them. You can just open the design on your embroidery machine and merge the background quilting with the applique design. However, because I'm tweaking it today, I don't know that I could do that on my Stellaire by itself because I'm deleting certain steps. I would think that the machine, as soon as I would put in the 6x10 hoop, it would tell me that this design is not going to fit in this field. So that's where I think software comes in very handy when we have to tweak things, when we want to personalize things. I would much rather do it on my computer than at the machine itself. It all depends on what size screen you have on your machine. My first machine had a screen this big and it was on grayscale, black and white. So I couldn't see anything on that thing. So I always had my computer open next to my machine to visualize my design. So Embrilliance Essentials, highly recommend. And I have a full course teaching you how to use this software if that's something you're interested in. I think the information should be down below in the description box. So let's jump over to Essentials now. Screen's going to look a little crazy. Let me change it over. Boom. Okay, so this is Embrilliance Essentials, and I already have everything pulled up, but I'm going to show you, how I did it from the get-go. But I just wanted to show you kind of what we're working with. We have our background quilting and our fire station applique design. So you can see they're two separate designs. Background quilting is a separate purchase on Kimberbell's website. Again, all that info is on the page on my website that's dedicated to this sew along. So let's start from scratch. Let's say we're brand new, we're opening it up. So you have you can either, when you open it up, the screen will be blank, or you can hit right here, a new page, and open up one. And you should usually see your hoop there. And I can look down here in the status bar and I could see which hoop I have open. You want to go ahead and open the hoop that you plan on working with. So if it's not already open to that one, hit the preference window, hoops, and scroll down until you see the one that you're working with, whether it be 5x7, 6x10, or like I think this is the 9x9 or 9.5x9.5. This would be the one I'd use if I was doing everything on my Stellaire without tweaking things. But we're going to do the 6x10 and I'm going to hit apply and okay. So now I know I have the right hoop size open. The first design that you're going to want to open is the background quilting. So if I go to my things, okay, I have a folder just for embroidery designs. Where is Kimberbell? Right here. I have a folder just for Kimberbell. And then I have a folder just for Main Street Celebration. There we go. So I have 3 things in here. I have the designs themselves for that came with the bench pillow. And I have 2 background quilting designs. One is the design we're using on every block, and one is a border quilting design. That's what we'll use on the borders when we're done. So first I'm going to go to the regular background quilting, double click. We have embroidery files or instructions. Go to the embroidery files. You have 2 choices, block by block or clear blue tiles. I'm doing everything by block, and pick your format of choice. And now here are all the designs. And if you refer to your cheat sheet, we're opening Patriotic 1 6x8. So where are we? 6x8 right here. This is us. So I can either double click it and it will automatically open in Embrilliance for me because that's how I have my computer set up. Or I can just drag it and drop it like so. And now it's there. I want you to immediately notice that this red line comes up here. This is telling me that this design does not fit in this hoop. This red line is telling me it's too big. It is 6.5 inches wide, where my hoop is actually only 6 5/16 wide. So it is like 3/16 too big to fit in my hoop, but we're going to fix that. So let's go ahead and do it now. I thought my first option was to just delete these 2 steps here. So if you're not familiar with background quilting yet, it's going to come in 5 steps. The first step is going to tell you where to put your batting. This is your batting placement step. If you have pieces of batting that are bigger and not pre-cut to size, then you're going to lay your batting over your placement step and then stitch step number 2, which is a batting tack down step. And it will now tack your batting into place, and you will trim all the excess batting around the edges just like you would an applique. I have chosen to pre-cut my batting so that it's going to fit perfectly in this box. So I have been skipping this step with every block that I do, but this is personal preference. You do whichever way you like best. If you want to follow along and do it like me, where you pre-cut it to size, we're going to delete this step. If you're going to have it bigger and want to trim it, don't delete this step, okay? Next is the background fabric placement step. I personally have been skipping this step too because to me it's silly. I know that I need to put my background fabric directly on top of the batting that I just placed there. And it's kind of easy to center because the background fabric's a lot bigger. So I've been skipping this step anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and hit delete on my keyboard here and hit delete on my keyboard here. So I've deleted steps 2 and 3. Now, what was step 4 is the background fabric tack down. I have been doing with all my blocks, but this is the one that is giving me trouble because it's too big. If you zoom in and look, there's your hoop, there's that line. You see it's right outside of it. So my first thought was just to delete this line altogether. If we delete it, let me click it, hit delete on my keyboard. Now my red line goes away because the background quilting design is actually the exact size of the finished block. My placement for my batting and my background quilting. So I could do that and just not have a basting stitch for my background fabric. But I was thinking right before I started this video, another option would be if you wanted to keep this basting stitch, we could make it fit. And we could do that by just selecting that basting stitch. And if I zoom in, where's my hoop? Okay. I can't see my hoop when I'm zoomed in this much, huh? I could click right here on the side. Nope, nope, nope. Undo. I want just this orange line selected. There we go. All right, I want to be able to see my hoop. So there's the hoop line. There's my orange line. I can drag it right there. Okay. Now let me go to the other side. Notice I'm not changing the size of the whole thing. I'm just doing the 2 outer sides because those are the ones that are poking out. Look, as soon as I did, you see that red line at the bottom? Watch this right here. There, it went away. So I can move that line to be right inside. And that's if I still want to do my basting stitch. So the top and the bottom basting stitch are still a full 1/4 inch away from the background quilting, but I've tightened in the basting stitch on the sides. They're probably more like 1/8 of an inch or so, which this will help just baste my background fabric. But we're going to remove this basting stitch after anyways. So it really doesn't matter if it's not quite in the right spot. I do kind of use it sometimes as a guide of where to trim. But I think I still won't have any trouble trimming. I'll just make sure these are actually a 1/4 inch away from where I see my basting stitch was when I'm ready to trim. But I think that those are your 2 options. We can either delete this step altogether. And so then all you're having is your batting lines and your background quilting. Or if you still want to baste your background fabric all I did was drag those two sides in, make sure only this one is selected. And so all I did was resize that line, not my whole thing. Now, I did have someone email me and ask, why can't we just resize this whole design and make it fit? When we do that, we are essentially altering the overall size of each block. So that's okay if you alter the design of every single block that we do. But because the first block we did was 4x8 and it fits in a 6x10 hoop just fine, I didn't alter anything. That block's going to end up being slightly bigger if I would change the size of all of the other blocks that are 6x8 that don't fit in the 6x10 hoop. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to necessarily alter the overall design of how big my batting is and how my background quilting stitches out. All I've done is altered the basting stitch for the background fabric that I am going to be removing after. So that's the only thing I've altered. So I keep everything else the same. And so that doesn't change my overall block size when we're done. So those are your options if you have a 6x10 hoop and that's your largest embroidery field that you have. Okay, now that I have my background quilting design fix the way I wanted, whether you want to delete this basting stitch or resize it like I did. Now it's ready for me to add my applique design on top of. So the easiest way I think it is to merge a design is to simply click on the design, drag it, and drop it. But you have other options. You can also click this button right here, which is merge a stitch file, and you would click that and then navigate to where that design is located. So for me, embroidery files, Kimberbell, here it is, Main Street. There, this is the folder with the designs. I can't see anything, so let me click it now. Okay, that must be the designs. PES. No, I don't want. So there's another folder inside PES. These are all your split designs, the 5x7. I'm using the regular. Here we go. So here's the fire station. I would find it and then click the import button. And if you notice, it puts it directly on top and centered. There's nothing I need to move between the background fabric and the applique design. Everything is right where it should be. There is one thing though that I am going to change in the fire station applique design, and that is there are two steps at the beginning, and these are steps that are needed if you're not doing background quilting. This step helps you with placement to figure out right where to put your background fabric, and this step bastes down your background fabric. But I have no need for that because I've already got my batting and my background fabric in place and batted down. So I can simply highlight these steps and hit delete, and then highlight that basting stitch step and hit delete. And you could keep this, I just hit undo up here. If you wanted to keep this basting stitch step, you could, instead of altering the basting stitch step that I did here. But I prefer this one because it's actually, at least these two lines up the top and bottom, kind of mark where my cut should be. Where this basting stitch box is the exact same as the batting, which I don't want to remove a basting stitch there. I'd rather it be kind of outside of where the batting is. So I'd rather just delete this step. So I'm gonna hit delete. Okay, and so then the first actual step of the fire station is a placement and a tack down for, pieces of the firehouse. So if you just scroll down, you look, there are lots of steps to this design. Most of them is going to be placement. You can see it here. It's the fabric that's going to go behind the fire truck, and that's the tack down. And then there is some sort of stitch here at the bottom of that fabric. But then the next step is, oops, the placement, looks like for the whole bit of the fire station, and then tack down, and then placement for the bottom. So you can kind of click on all these steps and see what we're in, what's in store for us. Lots of little pieces of applique that have to be done before. There's the windows, before we actually get to all the finishing stitches. So there's little pieces of the wheels tacked down, the truck itself tacked down. Then we have some decorative stitching, but then there's the applique for the clock placement tacked down. And it looks like for this one, it's a bean stitch finish. So this is not only the tack down, but it's also the finishing stitch. Then the face of the clock, then the actual arms. And now then we start getting to all the finishing stitches. All those satin stitches are going to cover up the raw edges of all of this applique. The clock's a little different because that's a bean stitch applique. And so you can see all of that. The windows. So lots of stitching, changing colors happening here. They have two shades of red in the color scheme. One is darker than another, but it's really hard to tell. So I'll have to figure out which red I'm using for which one of these steps. And these always don't transfer over to my machine well. Sometimes it'll say totally different colors once I sent it to my machine. So I may still be referencing back to my computer for what color I'm going to load next. So you can see. Oh, and then we have all the firework bits. And then the last bit is the little eyelets for the fairy lights, which we went over in that last block, the welcome block that we did. So we could see all the steps. There's a lot, but it's going to be fun. I'm having some issues with sending designs over as Wi-Fi to my machine right now. So I'm going to show you how to save it to a USB stick. So I have my USB stick plugged in my computer right now. So I'm going to go hit File and Save Stitch File As. You notice they have some working files and they have stitch files. Stitch files is what we actually send to our machine. Working files are files that we save on our computer if I want to come back and open this design and edit it again in the future. That is a working file. So stitch file is what we want to send. So I'm going to hit Save Stitch File As. I'm going to go and find my USB stick here on the side panel of my files and folders. And I'm going to name it MSC for Main Street Celebration. This is block number 2, Fire Station. Okay, and then make sure it is saving as a format that matches your machine. I have a brother, so PES, and I'm going to hit save. And I already tried saving it. I'm replacing it because I messed up the first time around trying to save it. Okay, so now it is saved to my USB stick. So now I should be able to unplug it from my computer. Oh no, I forgot. I need to actually eject it from my computer. Let's go back. All right, so with USB sticks, most computers don't like it when you just pull them out. So on my Mac here, there's this little eject button next to my USB stick. So I can click that and it goes away. I think on Windows computers, there's some kind of little picture of a USB down in the bottom right corner, and you can click it and it'll say eject media safely, something like that. And that's when you select that option, then it will say, okay, now it's safe for you to remove your USB. Okay, so I got mine out, little USB stick, and now I'm going to plug it into the side of my machine. And depending on where you are in your machine, your home screen, there should be some options of memory and a USB looking symbol. So I have a Wi-Fi symbol, I have my machine memory, And I have cloud storage on this one, and I have this little USB symbol. So I'm gonna click that. It's gonna read my USB drive now, and I'm just gonna scroll down until I see Main Street Celebration Fire Station. This little thing shows up on every single design I send to this machine, and that's telling me the display correct thread information may not be as what, like I said, I saw on my computer earlier. So here's the design. I don't need to do anything to it because I did everything in Brilliance already. So I can hit set, and this is another edit screen. And I mentioned in a previous video that if you're opening the designs on your machine and you're not doing anything in Brilliance, this is where you would open the background quilting design first, get to this screen, and then there's that add button. Click that. It brings you back to your home screen. Navigate to wherever you have the applique design, click it, and then it will merge the two right on top of each other, just like it did on my computer. But I'm not editing any steps on the machine like I did on my computer. So that's only the option if you have a hoop size that's big enough. All right, so now here we go. This is ready to stitch. So I need to load my hoop. And I have white thread loaded. I think that's fine for now. And I got to make sure my little lever's down. Okay, and then lower my presser foot. My needle is threaded. The first stitch is a placement telling me where to put my batting. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that. And I'm going to grab my batting and my little Elmer's glue stick, because that is what I've been using to keep my batting in place. All right, now that this is done stitching the placement stitch, we'll go to the craft table and add the batting. Okie dokie. Let me make sure I have everything on here. Good. Okay. So here is my 6x10 hoop, and I have this white stitch line going around here telling me right where to place my batting. Like I mentioned earlier, I pre-cut all my batting to size, so it is already going to fit perfectly in this little box because I cut it to be 6x8, which I have listed on my cheat sheet for you. If you like the other method where you trim your batting like an applique, you can cut your batting to be a little bit bigger, like 7x9 inches. And I have a batting cut sheet on the back of the last page of my organizational chart. And so it tells you how many you need and which size. But I went with this method where I cut it to size. And so this is the cuts that I did. All right, so what I'm going to use is just my little Elmer's glue stick. And I'm just going to add some glue on the inside of the stabilizer where the batting is going. And I think this glue stick is starting to dry up, so you don't see the purple as much anymore, but it still works. So I'm just going to add that in place like so. And that's why I don't need to do step number 2, because I don't need to tack this down. I got it in place. Now, let's get our background fabric. And here's my background fabric. I already have it interfaced with Pellon SF101. And now you can see this is where I'm like, it's silly to stitch a placement stitch for this, because I think it's pretty obvious that I just put it right on top of the batting. And it's a good size bigger than the batting, so there's no worried about, if that I don't put it exactly in the right place. It is big enough to where it's easy to place right over. And now, whether you skip this basting stitch or we stitch it, that's going to be our next step, and it's just going to baste this into place. And I have been using this water soluble thread for all of my basting stitches so that it's super easy to remove when we're done, because we are going to remove the basting stitch before we trim the final block. So let's go back over to the machine. load our hoop, and I'm going to add my water soluble thread. All right, now that the water soluble thread is in place, I got my basting stitch. I'm going to lower my presser foot and let it stitch that step. Okay, now that that basting stitch is done, take the water soluble thread off. I'm going to go back to my white thread because that is the color I am using for my background quilting. And this is totally personal preference. I had in my head white was going to look best. I do admit after I did my first block, I kind of wish I would have did something not so contrasting, but I've already made my first block. I want the background quilting to be consistent, so I'm just going to carry on. But now you can see what the white will look like. Maybe if you want to go with something that blends into your background fabric a little bit better, you can learn from my calls here. I wouldn't say mistake. It's not a mistake, but it's a preference. So background quilting, stitch out, and then we'll start all the applique. Okie dokie. So now we are done with the background quilting and we are ready to start appliquing. Now with all of the appliques except the clock, we saw that there's a satin stitch finish. So that means it doesn't matter what color we use for the placement stitch and what color we use for the tack down stitch. So I'm gonna go ahead and maybe leave, I don't know if I should leave my white on. I should do something I'm gonna see a little bit better. Let's do something we'll see better. Let's see, how about yellow? Yellow will show up a little bit better, or definitely red. I still have to figure out, so these are the two reds I have. You see how one's a little bit darker than the other? When you look at the instructions, they have thread colors listed like in these little boxes. It's telling you what thread color to use. And most of this is going to be blue, black, gray, white, and then there's a red. I guess a yellow or tan, a light blue. But I still don't know which red is which according to the color scheme. So I'll just go ahead and use this one. Let's put this on. And at least I'll see this good for the tack down stuff. Also, I should probably look and see. I want to say, actually, let's use black because there is, if I remember right, there's a placement, tack down, and then this decorative stitch at the bottom of the door of the fire truck, and that they want in black. So let me do black. I think I'll be able to see that clearly on my fabric. I just want y'all to be able to see it clearly too in the video. But like I said, normally definitely for a placement stitch. Let's see, there's a tail poking up, so let me get that. Okay. Normally any placement stitch, doesn't matter what color you stitch it, it's going to get covered up. Tack down stitches only matter when it's, maybe a blanket stitch, a zigzag stitch, a bean stitch is the final for your applique. Alrighty, so what is the first bit of applique? Let's check our instructions. I know it's the kind of the background for the fire door area. So that is where we are going to use, I think I have this dark blue fabric is what I chose. They have a black fabric. Okay, let me take all my pieces of applique out of my envelope. I just see them all spread out in front of me. So stitch the inner building placement line, place the fabric right side up, stitch the tack down line, and then stitch the decorative outline. So it's actually not in black, it's in blue. So this is a darker blue that I got for this step. So I ironed Heat and Bond Light on the back of all of my applique fabric. So I am going to peel off the paper backing now and place this right over the little square placement line that we have. And just double check. Again, I'm going to lower my presser foot and stitch. And then I guess I'm actually going to load my blue thread for that little decorative stitch. Okay, so it's going to go around it twice for the tack down. And I am going to go ahead and take this off the machine now, and we'll go to the craft table and trim out this piece of applique. All right, so now we have our little piece of applique here. I am going to, I need to plug in my little mini iron because we will be ironing our pieces of applique after we trim them because we have that Heat and Bond Light on the back. That's just going to keep everything nice and in place. And I'm just using my applique scissors, and I am going to trim as close to that stitch line as possible. Okay, so once you have that trimmed, you can use, oh, I still don't have it turned on, but I have a little mini iron, fits nicely in my hoop. I got my wool mat under my hoop, and you're just going to press this and activate that Heat and Bond Light that's on the underside of your applique. This is a choice, a preference, I would say. Some people like to use the same Pellon SF101 on the back of their pieces of applique, and then no heating, ironing is required. I've always put Heat and Bond Light on the backs of my applique and iron them into place. Again, that's a personal preference. You don't have to put anything on the back of your pieces of applique. It especially works best for things that you're going to wash. Now, this pillow we're probably not going to put in the wash a whole bunch, so I don't have to worry about this like puckering out after a wash and bubbling up and separating from the background fabric. But it's a good habit to get really nice, professional looking appliques, I think, to add Heat and Bond Light to the back of them. So that's what I'm doing. I have it all ironed on the back, so I'm just going to continue with that. Okay, now that we have that piece trimmed, the next step is a decorative stitch at the bottom of that. And I thought it was black, but it's actually blue. So I got my blue thread Move that on. And it's going to do a little decorative stitch under that. And then we'll move on to a whole bunch of pieces of applique, with the next being the actual firehouse, which this is the red fabric I'm using for the firehouse. And see, like this red, I think matches it better than this dark red. So this will be the red I use. Okay, so that little decorative stitch is done. I am going to go, let's see. I don't know if I should go back to my black fabric. My black, not fabric, thread, so I can see my outlines better. I'm going to go back to black thread for all of my tack down and positioning stitches. So hopefully you and I can see it better. Okay, so now that that's done, the next is the placement for the firehouse. Another thing that helps with Heat and Bond Light or the Pellon SF101 on the back of your applique fabric is, say your background fabric is super busy, or like in our case, we have a super busy background quilting design happening behind it. It kind of blocks things from being able to be seen through the fabric. Okay, so I have this. I'm going to peel off. I've already ironed it on there. And so when you peel off the paper backing, now you can see there is some adhesive here. So it almost works like double-sided tape. At first we stuck it to the back of the fabric, and now we're going to stick it to where it adheres to the background fabric. So I am just covering up this placement stitch and lower my presser foot, and now it's going to tack down. Okay, now we'll go back to the craft table and trim and iron. So here is my firehouse, and all these little pieces of applique will treat the same. Placement, put your fabric, tack down, trim, iron, and then rinse and repeat. And the more you practice with trimming applique, the quicker you get. You know, the first time I trimmed applique, I took forever. But the more you do it, really gets pretty efficient. And then for those that hate doing this, but have something like a scan and cut or silhouette, you can pre-cut all of your applique pieces, almost just like I pre-cut my batting to fit perfectly. It kind of works the same way. You pre-cut your applique pieces to fit perfectly. You could use some glue or something like that to keep it right. You know, you still do your placement stitch, and you actually, I think you pre-cut your applique pieces to where they're a smidge bigger, so that you kind of have the same effect. When you do the tack down stitch, it will still catch it right there on the edges. So that applique is done. So the next is some little pieces at the bottom. Keeping my black thread on. There's the placement stitch. And for that, we're using white. And I have, let's see. All right, that is foundation fabric. So I'm going to refer back to my fabric list and look for Fire Station foundation. See, I have one that's 4x2. I don't know if that's this fabric though. It might be this one. 4 division. No, there's 2 with this. I'm trying to remember now which fabric I saved for which. No, that's windows. Let's see, this much, this is this fabric I have at the bottom here. This is the garage door, 3 by 1.5. And then these 2 pieces are the fire station foundation and floor division. So, oops, this one is the foundation piece. So I just kind of refer back to my cut list so I know which piece is for what. Because this has a lot of applique. So I'll peel that off, lay that in place, lower and stitch. So I might want to lay out all my applique pieces in order now so I don't confuse myself. So that was foundation. Then next is garage door. And I've determined the garage door I'm doing with this white fabric. So that's next. Then after the garage door is the floor division. You said that that's the same fabric as the foundation, but I have a different cut piece. And then it's windows. I know this is my windows fabric. Then it is tire placement. And I think tires is this black like faux leather. Add that. And then we have the actual fire truck in red. It gets less confusing then because then it's like very obvious different colors. Okay, so at least I know my difference between all these different whites that I have now. Okay, so this is done. We can go trim and iron. All right, so we can put our hoop back on the machine, lower the presser foot, and it's going to stitch the placement stitch right here. And that is, what is it called? The garage door. And because I laid out my fabric, now I know what I'm doing. For me, this is a white fabric. Put some little stars on it. And I just have to peel the paper backing off and put it right in place, lower, and now do the tack down. Okay, and now we have what I think is called the floor division. Placement stitch. I got my fabric. For me, it's the same fabric I used for the foundation. Okay, place that there and tack down. Okay, and the next bit of applique is the windows. So first we'll stitch the placement lines. This is what I'm using as my window fabric. I like it. It looks like graph paper. I thought that would be cute for the windows. Peel the heat bond light off the back. Now I have it ready. When the placement stitches are done. Okay, the placement stitches are done. I have my window fabric with the backing peeled off. This has some like grid lines on it, so I am going to try and make sure they are straight when I lay this down. I'm going to hold my fingers here when it does these first couple stitches, get it in place. And now it will do the tack down for each window. All right, and now we will trim and iron. Okay, that is all trimmed. Thinking I can get a little closer right here. Right here too. Okay, that's good enough. And a little ironing. Okay, so we're all done with the windows, and now we will move on to the next step. Okay, now the next step is the placement stitch for the wheels. Now, I'm almost positive this particular applique is going to be a bean stitch applique, so there won't be anything to cover up our thread color, but this is in black. So I'm going to do the placement stitch in black and then the tack down stitch in black. The tack down is also, I believe, the final stitch. We're about to find out. Let's see. And I'm going to double check my embellishments list of the black embroidery. Yes, Fire Station tires. That's the black leather faux vinyl, faux leather vinyl that came with the embellishment kit. So there is my placement. And now we will put that right there. It's actually way more than we need, so I'm gonna move it over so that I can have some leftovers for another project later. And now that gets stitched down. And yeah, if you notice in the instructions, like where a color doesn't matter, it has these little striped lines. Your thread color does not matter, but where it does matter, it's filled in. And for these steps, it has it as black. So next, after this, is the fire truck. And I'm going to do that in a different red fabric. This is actually the same red fabric that I'm using for my skinnier inner border on the quilt when we're ready for that part. Okay, so we got to trim this. I'm going to take this off and bring it to the craft table to trim. Okie dokie. And usually with a bean stitch finish, I don't trim it as close as I would for a normal applique, but let's see, I might still do this one rather close. So yeah, it's just your preference, whatever you think looks best. The little tires. And I'm going to do this. So I have all this left over I can use for another project. That's one thing with the cutting instructions, always for Kimberbell, especially for all the little pieces of applique, they give you a lot of wiggle room. So typically when I cut my fabrics for an applique, I'm only making it like very slightly bigger than the placement stitch. Kimberbell cutting instructions give you more, which in one way it's good, you can't mess it up. Another way it's a little bit wasteful. So whenever I'm doing things that I see I have more than enough like this, instead of putting that right smack in the middle and end up throwing all of this away, I tried to place it to where it was right here on the side corner. So I have all this left over. Okay, so now we'll go back to the machine. And the next is the placement stitch for the truck. And that's back to not mattering what color it is. And I got my red fabric, peel my backing off. put that in place and tack down. I think after this, we are done with the bulk of the applique. All that's left is the actual clock tower. And that is not a satin stitch one. So I think my next color is gray. Yeah, these are like the little embellishments on the clock tower. And I'm doing that in gray. Let me go trim this so before I mess with any of that. Now, if you noticed, after I trimmed the tires, I didn't press those. That is a specialty fabric. The embroidery leather, that's a specialty fabric that does not like heat. So I did not worry about ironing those. I didn't have heat and bond light on the back of that. And now because I'm cutting the fire truck and it's right next to those little black leather tires, I'm going to be very careful. Actually, my iron is not even warm anymore. I let it go cold on accident. When I iron this, I'm going to make sure my iron does not touch my little cute little tires. Isn't that adorable? I love this fabric because it looks like little pinwheels. Let's see. So I'm just going to lightly get the top of my truck, not touching my tires. Okay, so I think that's all the main pieces of applique that are done. Definitely we don't need the iron anymore, I don't think. I think we might have a applique glitter that might need it. But next, I think we start working on the clock. And I need to thread my needle. Switching over to the gray. Okay. Double check instructions. Yep. Stitch the clock post scroll work detail. Lower my presser foot and stitch. And then after this, we do the clock post tack down. Again, keeping the gray thread. And then we trim the leather. They do also have a note that the clock post and face are left as a raw edge applique and will not have additional cover stitches. And no SVG files are provided for raw edge design. So if you are using a scan and cut to pre-cut your applique pieces, they won't have one for this clock. You will have to trim it. Okay. And then we'll stitch the clock face leather. What are we doing? Okay, so I think it's using this dark blue faux leather as for the clock face. So I'm gonna have this. I got the shiny silver leather for the clock tower, clock tall part. This one's for the face. So those, oh, they have more applique too after. Let's see, we have white leather. It's going to make little bricks here on the fire station, white leather. So we still have some more pieces of applique, but none of them, they're all bean stitch applique. Okay, so that's the scroll work. So next is keeping the gray thread on, the placement stitch. All right, it's showing me where to put my shiny silver leather. Okay, put that down. Make sure I cover up all my placement stitch. And now we'll do the tack down for the clock. Okay, so normally I would take this off and trim it right before the next step. However, the next bit of applique is actually right on top of the circle, and it's the clock face. So I think I could get away with stitching the placement line and the tack down for this, and then taking it off and trimming everything. Now I'm going to place the clock face, navy embroidery leather, and that is going to tack down. And then I'm going to take it off and trim everything. Oh, that's cute. It's not only just a beam stitch, but it's doing kind of the little notches of the clock in it as well. And I did that in the gray thread as well. Okay. Now we'll go trim everything in one go. Okay. So first I'm going to trim the navy blue clock face. And I'm just going to go to it and around. And I think we'll end up cutting this fairly close to the stitch line because that's the only way you're going to see the little sliver of silver that's going to be behind it. Okay, so that's the clock face. I did not do the best job. The circle's a little wonky, but that's fine. Okay, that's the clock face. So now we'll do the silver bit. Okay, so now our clock is good and trimmed, and you can just go adjust some things if you want. Like, find this side is a little thicker than this side, so I'm gonna trim it down. But overall, that looks really good. I love the specialty pieces of applique. I think it really just gives it a good pop of fun and texture on your appliques. All right, so back to the machine. If I remember correctly, next is going to be a little detail on the clock face, and that they recommend white thread. So I'm going to trim my gray, take that off, put my white thread on. And now I'm going to check my instructions and see what my other colors coming up are going to be so I can get them in order. Okay, so that's clock face. Have a long tail happening there. Oh, it sucked it all in. Good. Okay. The next, clock hand detail, then garage door detail in black. Black is next. And then I think I go back to gray. And then the building satin outline. And so I'm going to do this red because I find it matches my building better. Okay, so not to get ahead of myself, we got the clock hand detail. That's done. That was in white. Now we're going to black. For garage door detail. All right, that is done. Now we are going back to gray for some detail around the bottom of the foundation. Okay, and the next color is the red fire station outline, so the building itself. Okay, that is ready, and now we will stitch that. Okay, we are done now with the firehouse. And next we will go back to gray. And this is going to stitch some more details on the building here. All right, we are done stitching that. Next, we are switching to black for, I think this is like a little flagpole at the top of the building. And now this is like the roof, which I'm doing in like a tan color. Okie dokie. Now that we are done with that step, now I think we're on the final piece of applique, and that is going to be these little white blocks that kind of make up the foundation of the outer parts of the building. And we're going to change over to white thread first. And that is going to stitch the placement lines. And then I have my white embroidery leather ready for the actual tack down stitches and applique after. Okay, now that that placement stitch is done, I can add my white embroidery leather right over everything and stitch the tack down again with the white thread. Okay, my bobbin thread is running out, so I am going to finish this little tack down box. Let's see if it lets me. Sometimes they'll say the bobbin is empty, but it still has a little bit left. Let me just try to get this box done. And there, now it's cut it. It's moving it to the next one. And I'm gonna pause it there, raise my needle, raise my presser foot. Let me double check on the back that I actually had bobbin thread for this one. Yes, it all went through. I can see some still on my bobbin. Okay, let's see. There's still some left on there, but not enough to finish by any means. So I'm going to grab a new full pre-wound bobbin. Make sure it's going in the counterclockwise direction. Drop it in. Pull it through the bobbin thread path, and I pull about 12 inches out before I cut it. Kind of helps set the bobbin tension so that it is correct. And now I can put my hoop back on. I don't have to worry about backing up stitches or anything because it's starting at a brand new point with these little boxes. So now I can just go. Sorry, return. Now I can go. Okay. Okay, those little applique pieces are now tacked down, and this is also their finishing stitch since it's a bean stitch. Now we can go trim them. Okay, and see some little thread tails I want to trim as well. Okay, and we will just trim each of these boxes, and you can trim as close or as far away from that stitch line as you would like. This just gives some little extra detail. I can save this and use it for another project. Okay, that came out really cute. There's our little white leather foundation blocks. So now the next step is actually the satin stitching outside of each of the windows. And I'm doing that in a very light blue thread color. All right, so we're done with kind of the outline of the windows, and next we change to gray for like a ledge on each window. And then we have more applique that I totally forgot about, and that's some fancy vinyl for the windows. So we'll get to that next. But okay, so gray for the little ledges. Okay, so those window ledges are done. Next, we are going to place some vinyl on top of the windows. So let me see. I have a little tail here I want to fix. All right. But we had two pieces of vinyl that were included in the embellishment kit. One has a kind of minty greenish blue tint to it, and the other one is very, very clear. So I don't know. Can you see this has a little bit more of a blue tint than this one? Maybe against the white of the machine, you should see it. The bluish one is the one what we're going to use. And we are switching back to white thread. So let me load that. There's no placement line because we already see where our windows are. Okay, thread my needle. Okay, I got the minty color vinyl. You might want to wipe it and make sure you don't have a bunch of lint and thread stuck to it. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure mine's somewhat clean. Okay, and now we're going to place that right on top of our windows. This piece, according to the cut directions, much bigger than you need, so it shouldn't be any problem. And I'm going to lower the presser foot, and this is going to do just a white outline around each window, and then we'll go and trim the vinyl after. So it just kind of gives a little almost reflective bit to each window, which I think is a really nice touch. So we'll wait for that to finish and then we'll trim. That is done. We'll take that off. And I don't know if you could see the vinyl, and now we'll go trim it around each window. I think that gives it a really cute touch. And then you have another piece of vinyl that we're going to use on the fire truck when we finish the details of the fire truck as well. So I think I'm going to trim these kind of close. To that white stitch line, just so that the reflectiveness stays confined to that little window space. Okay, let me just trim this one a little better. All right, here we go. There is our little windows with vinyl. I like how you can have that reflection kind of off of it. That's super cute. All right, let's go back to the machine and keep working. Now we are going to start stitching on the fire truck. And we're on step number 37 in the instructions. And that is to stitch fire truck light fill. And then next is satin stitch fire truck outline. And then fire truck panel fill. They have all of those as red on the instructions. Now you see they have red boxes there, but I honestly can't tell if those are 3 different shades of red. I can't tell. But one thing I do know is that my fire truck is a darker red than my house. So I'm going to use my darker red for these details. So let's take my white off. I'll put my darker red. This is all going to be personal preference at this point, whatever colors you want to do. If you want to do different shades of red for these 3 steps, all up to you. I think I'm going to do all 3 of these steps in this darker red now. That all that red detail is done, there's now a gray detail we are going to stitch out. Okay, the gray detail is done. Next is a bit of kind of yellowish, yellow gold detail. I'm using kind of a brighter yellow thread, and these are going to be some of the lights on the bottom of the fire truck. So that's just a small detail. Okay, so that is done. Next, we're putting on white thread, and we're going to do the windows of the fire truck. And we have another piece of applique. I guess 2 more now. Let me not lose my pieces. So I have a piece of white glitter, and then I have the clear vinyl. So I think with the white thread, we're going to stitch a placement line. I hate jump stitches. Okay. So I think that's placement for this white glitter. Let me trim this jump stitch that happened. Okay. Now we are going to use some of that white applique glitter that came in the embellishment kit. And remember, with the applique glitter, you have to peel off the clear transfer sheet off the front. And so we're going to put that down right where the placement stitch was. And since it's such a little piece, if you're worried about it moving, you can add some tape, or in my case, I'm just going to hold it with a stiletto. It's strange because it's actually almost like it's going to be a fill stitch on top of it. So, and that's not moving now. So it's going to stitch a window fill. And then after it's done stitching, we'll be able to just tear away this applique glitter. And then we will add the white vinyl, the clear vinyl, and then trim. And then we'll go back to black thread. So all that's being done in white. And then we go back to black thread to stitch the words fire station. So I'm gonna get my black thread. Okay, so it almost did like a chevron fill stitch inside of the white applique glitter, and it's saying now you can just tear the applique glitter right away, just like tearaway stabilizer. I got a little piece right here in the middle. Okay, I got that little piece in the middle. So it's kind of strange because I don't know why the applique glitter was even needed if we're going to stitch right on top of it, but just following instructions. Okay, now we take our clear vinyl and place that right on top of our little windows. Again, this piece is a lot bigger than we need, so I'm going to move it over to the side here. And I'm keeping on my white thread. And this is going to give those windows a little bit of reflectiveness. Now we will take this off and trim that clear vinyl that we put on top of the windows. Okay, I don't even know if you can see, but I got this big piece of clear there, and I'm just going to trim a little rectangle around our window. And I didn't use but a quarter of the piece I had cut, so I could save that if I want to. All right, and yeah, that's it. So that is our little reflective window. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but it's cute. Okay, let's go back to the machine and see what is next. I think, oh, I have my black thread ready. And oh, now it's actually going to stitch the words fire station right up here in this little white block that we have. Okay, now that fire station is done, there are a white star and a white burst of fireworks happening. But instead of using white thread, I'm going to go to my silver metallic thread like I used in the first block. So I'm going to put that on and watch it closely because last time it kept coming off of my thread path while it was stitching and getting hung up on stuff. So, oh, wait. Let me pull my back thread out. Okay, there we go. So needle is threaded. So let's see how this goes. Okay, now that that firework detail is done, we have some red stars, and I am going to use the red metallic thread for those. And now the last step are the little blue eyelet holes that are going to be where the fairy lights end up. And that is the last stitch step of this extra detailed block. Okay, so we are all done stitching our fire station block. So we have a little bit cleanup to do and trimming. But look how cute it came out. Very, very, very cute. All right, so here is our block. We can go ahead and take it out of the hoop. And because we did do a basting stitch, I'm going to use my Q-tip and water to go ahead and get that basting stitch out. Okay, now that that is kind of washed away, we can go grab the bobbin thread on the back and it should pull right out. And then we want to carefully kind of press around the outside of the block I'm gonna be very wary of my metallic thread and of my specialty leather pieces. So I'm just kind of gonna get the outer edges where I wet it nice and flat and pressed because I want it like that before I trim it. Okay, so I have my iron, and I do still have my um, protector on it. Let me see. Let me turn up the heat. Okay, now that I pressed the kind of outer edges here, I'm going to put this on my rotating cutting mat and use my orange pop rulers to trim it just like we did in our first block, except the trimming is going to be a little bit different. So with this one, we have one orange pop ruler to use. So we don't have to do the two like we did in that first block because that first block was a bit skinnier. This one, the finished trimmed block is 6.5 by 8.5, which they have a orange pop ruler for. I'm gonna get my orange pop rulers out of my case. I think it's this one. Yep, 6.5 by 8.5. So here we go. And I like to trim from the back side. And I can use the top and bottom lines where my basting stitch was as a guide of where to line up my ruler. But my side spots, remember, I adjusted those in Embrilliance. I tightened it up so that it would fit in the hoop. So I am not going to use those as any sort of guide, but let me double check. Square finished block 6.5 with the fire station foundation being a quarter above the bottom inside edge of the ruler. Okay, so we might have to shift it up a little bit. So a quarter. And that is about right there. So I'm just going to make sure I got this right where I want it. Got a quarter. Okay, I think that's about where I want it. And now and then we will turn. Now we should have a lovely trimmed block. I have some little spots that didn't go through. Okay, now we have our finished fire station block, and it is ready now to put aside until we finish our other blocks and put everything together, and then add some of the cute embellishments that this will have. It has a little flag button, a little fire hydrant button, and I think a dog. Yeah, a little dog in the window is going to be super cute. And then plus the fairy light. So that is it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today on our Sew Along journey to make the Main Street Celebration bench pillow from Kimberbell. We finished our beautiful fire truck block. I think it came out very, very pretty. Very excited about it and excited to move on to the next step. So that is it for block number 2 in our video series. The next block we will be working on is the general store. And for that block, I'll do a different method where we will do it in a 5x7 hoop in 2 different hoopings. So stay tuned for that if you are looking forward to seeing how to put these beautiful blocks together using a 5x7 hoop. So that's it for today. Hope you have a great rest of your day with whatever you're doing, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.